The various palace masters and vice palace masters in the Dao Palace were amazed by Jian Wushuang's talent, and they secretly felt regretful that they weren't good at the Daos that Jian Wushuang meditated on. Of course, there were some that didn't feel that way. Each of the 13 palace masters in the Dao Palace explored different Daos, so there were 2 palace masters, Baiyu and Immortal, who were good at the World Dao and the Slaughter Dao, respectively. After seeing Jian Wushuang's information, both of these palace masters were a bit interested in him. Jian Wushuang is so talented. If he cultivates well, he'll definitely reach the eternal realm in the future. Although I have many disciples, there are no more than 3 who have a chance of reaching the eternal realm, but their chances of success are extremely low. Compared with Jian Wushuang, those 3 are far behind him in strength. It would really be a shame to miss out on such a genius. Palace Master Baiyu remained silent as he quickly called upon a disciple under him and commanded, "You, go deliver my token to Jian Wushuang and tell him that Baiyu is willing to take him as a disciple. He can come see me if he agrees." "Yes." The disciple immediately set out to look for Jian Wushuang. At the same time, a middle-aged man in a black robe, surrounded by an endless killing intent, also appeared at Enlightenment Mountain. Jian Wushuang. A soft voice spread out and entered a specific cave mansion. Jian Wushuang, who had been devoting himself to cultivation inside the cave mansion, woke up with a start and quickly appeared outside the cave mansion. Jian Wushuang looked at the black-robed middle-aged man as if he was an unparalleled god of death because of the terrifying atmosphere that was almost suffocating. "I am Immortal, one of palace masters from the Dao Palace, and I am good at the Slaughter Dao," the middle-aged man said. "You're a palace master?" Jian Wushuang was stunned at first, but quickly regained his composure and bowed to him. "Respectful greetings, Palace Master Immortal." "Stand up." Jian Wushuang straightened his back when Immortal waved at him, and then he got to the point. "I've browsed through your information. You're a real talent with exceptional potential. If you cultivate properly, you'll certainly be one of the top experts in the ancient sect. I'm willing to take you as my apprentice. Are you willing? Personal disciple?" It seemed to appeal Jian Wushuang. Not long ago, someone came to give him a token from Baiyu who also said he intended to accept him as a personal disciple, but now Immortal was here in person. "You are good at the Slaughter Dao, and I currently remain as the foremost in comprehending the Slaughter Dao," Immortal added. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and immediately said, "I'm sorry, Palace Master Immortal. I currently have no plans to apprentice to anyone." "Eh?" Immortal frowned. Generally speaking, disciples would select an expert to apprentice to right after joining the ancient sect. Jian Wushuang should do the same, but he just said he had no intention to do so. Even though he said it in a tactful way, he had still refused Immortal. "What a pity." Immortal shook his head, but he didn't force him. "You should take some time and think about it." After saying this, Immortal left. Not long after Immortal left, several vice palace masters from the Dao Palace and even the vice palace masters from the Sword Palace, except Vice Palace Master Nye, visited Jian Wushuang for one purpose, to take him as their apprentice. When Feng and Huaying heard about this preferential treatment, they got a bit jealous. It was known to all that both of them wanted to apprentice to a palace master or even a vice palace master, but they had to go through some trials and tribulations first. Yet, these palace masters and vice palace masters took the initiative to come to Jian Wushuang and even battle over him. Surprisingly, however, all these experts who wanted him to become their apprentice were rejected by him, including the palace masters from the Dao Palace like Baiyu and Immortal, as well as that vice palace master from the Sword Palace. Jian Wushuang had rejected them all. Jian Wushuang stood there alone, inside the ancient sect, cultivating quietly. During the day, he usually stayed at the Sword Palace, in front of the stone tablet at Sword Tower, meditating on the 3 sword scars. Sometimes he would head to the Dao Palace and listen to lectures delivered by experts who were good at World Dao and Slaughter Dao. In the evening, he returned to Enlightenment Mountain, letting his 2 original bodies separate and meditate quietly. He spent almost every day cultivating and meditating, maintaining a busy schedule. In a flash, 1 month had passed. At the Dao Palace, Numerous disciples of the ancient sect sat with their legs crossed at the huge martial arts practice field. At the very front, the strapping Feng, with sword-shaped eyebrows, prostrated himself before a palace master and gave him 3 respectful kowtows. "Master, I pay my respects." Feng's voice echoed throughout the entire martial arts practice field. Many of the disciples at the martial arts practice field looked at Feng with envious eyes. He's really persistent. Indeed, he spent a whole month going through trails, with an indomitable fighting spirit, until he finally managed to become apprenticed to Palace Master Destruction as a personal disciple. The barrier for becoming an apprentice to Palace Master Destruction was very high. He's so lucky to have become one of the personal disciples. Nearly all the disciples of the ancient sect would apprentice to an expert, while most of them would apprentice to those vice palace masters at the level of a superior divine realm expert. There was only a tiny minority who were lucky enough to apprentice to the 13 palace masters, and these disciples were still split into nominal disciples and personal disciples. Nominal disciples existed only in name. Although they could attend the lectures of the palace master and be instructed, the treatment was poorer compared with those personal disciples. In the ancient sect, almost every palace master or vice palace master had plenty of nominal disciples, but the number of personal disciples was small. They would try their best to instruct every personal disciple. The reasons Feng was able to become the personal disciple of Palace Master Destruction were that, on the one hand, he was gifted in the Destruction Tao, and on the other hand, he had perseverance and determination. So he was finally accepted. Another month passed. Today, Hua Ying, who had been brought back like Jian Wushuang and Feng, as an inner disciple, was finally apprenticed to an expert. The one he apprenticed to was also a palace master, but he was somewhat unfortunate. That palace master was only willing to take him as a nominal disciple because his cultivation age was so long that his potential had been exhausted. Even though he was only a nominal disciple, Hua Ying still felt happy about it. In addition, the other 3 people, Bing Shan, Xianing, and Wu Huang, were also able to apprentice to an expert within these 2 months. However, these 3 were only able to apprentice to those vice palace masters as nominal disciples. They would all have to try harder if they wanted to become personal disciples. As of now, 5 out of the 6 people that Xianyi brought back from Firmament Territory Feast had been apprenticed. Only Jian Wushuang was still cultivating on his own. There were 13 palace masters and plenty of vice palace masters in the Tao Palace. They would occasionally gather together. Right now, 4 palace masters had gathered in a pavilion to drink. Among them was Feng's master, Palace Master Destruction. "Destruction, how's your new personal disciple, Feng?" a palace master asked casually. "Not bad. Although his talent is only average among my personal disciples, he's perseverant and has a stable foundation. As long as he's taught step by step in the future, he'll be able to make good progress. He's even got a good chance of reaching the Eternal Realm," Palace Master Destruction said and laughed. "Congratulations! You've accepted another good disciple." Among the 6 men Palace Master Xian Yi brought back from the Firmament Territory Feast, Feng seems to be the best. The others are just ordinary, and that Jian Wushuang, he's too disappointing, a black-clothed lady said, shaking her head slightly. Jian Wushuang. Hearing that, all the palace masters looked at each other speechlessly. 2 months ago, when they heard from Xianyi that Jian Wushuang had cultivated for less than 40 years and came from the ancient world, they were astonished at Jian Wushuang's talent. Had they been good at the type of Tao which Jian Wushuang mediated on, they would have chosen him as a personal disciple. However, their impression of Jian Wushuang had been ruined to some extent during the past 2 months. He should have had a wonderful prospect. Unfortunately, he's too conceited and proud. The black-clothed lady said, "Even though he's talented, he came from the ancient world and his vision is too narrow. He has no idea how to develop himself in the future. What's most important for him now is to look for a good master. With a master's guidance and the cultivation resources in the ancient sect, his talent can be fully developed. It's a pity that he is too arrogant." During the past 2 months, many vice palace masters who are good at World Tao or Slaughter Tao have talked with him and wanted to accept him as a disciple. Even Palace Master Baiyu and Immortal went to talk to him in person, but all of them were rejected by him. Palace Master Baiyu will master the 9 occults of the world Dao soon. Palace Master Immortal's comprehension of the slaughter Dao is beyond anyone in the whole ancient sect. Jian Wushuang should feel lucky to be a disciple of either of them. How could he reject their offer? Does he think that he's so talented that he doesn't need any guidance? Upon hearing this, the other 3 Palace Master nodded quietly. He's indeed too proud. He's too young. Feng is different. He has cultivated for 1900 years and possesses a persistent and modest personality. I heard that Jian Wushuang often been staying in front of the sword tower over the past 2 months to meditate on the 3 sword scars left by Xianxia. If I haven't guessed wrong, he does intend to choose a master, but his target is Xianxia. Palace Master Xianxia? The black-clothed lady sneered. Xianxia is indeed strong, but one should choose an appropriate master instead of a strong one. Xianxia's comprehension of World Dao and Slaughter Dao isn't comparable to that of Palace Master Baiyu and Immortal. He can teach Jian Wushuang's sword principle at most. In addition, is it so easy to be a disciple of Palace Master Xianxia? The 3 sword scars left by Xianxia are so enigmatic that no one has been able to fully comprehend them so far. The first 2 sword scars alone are enough to make many sword principle geniuses ponder for hundreds of years. When he fully comprehends the first 2 sword scars, he'll have already missed his best stage of growth. The loss outweighs the gain. If I were him, I would definitely choose to be a disciple of Palace Master Baiyu or Immortal. Then I would take my time to meditate on the 3 sword scars and try to be a disciple of Palace Master Xianxia. After all, in ancient sect, it's acceptable for a genius to be a disciple of 2 or more experts. Other palace masters nodded their assent. Who knows what he's thinking? Every genius is proud. Just wait, when the sect competition starts in 2 years, he certainly won't be able to keep his position as an inner disciple. The competition among the outer disciples is more intense. After he suffers some setbacks and learns some lessons, he'll naturally understand how foolish his choice was, and then he'll find a way to make amends. Ah, what a pity! After all, he's still a peerless genius. Lots of disciples who were good at sword principle had gathered in the sword palace. When Jian Wushuang showed up, he immediately received many strange stares. It has already been 2 months. Hasn't Jian Wushuang chosen a master yet? Hey, he's really stupid. Does he think he can be so disdainful because of his talent? Without guidance from experts, he will have to cultivate by himself. Humph, wait and see. He'll learn a lesson in the sect competition 2 years from now. Many disciples lowered their voices while talking about him, but Jian Wushuang could still hear some of their voices clearly. However, he did not pay attention to these discussions and went directly to the sword tower. He quickly arrived at the stone tablet with the 3 sword scars on it. Sitting down in front of the stone tablet, Jian Wushuang sighed in relief and slowly calmed down. 2 months have passed. Feng, Huaying, and even Bingshan, Xianxia, and Wu Huang have chosen their masters. I'm still cultivating alone without guidance from any experts. It's no wonder these disciples in the ancient sect are gossiping about me in private. I'm afraid that lots of people are saying I'm conceited, Jian Wushuang thought with a smile. He did not care about these things though. They aren't me and don't know what I've been through. How can they know what I'm thinking? Jian Wushuang thought. He had made his decision the moment he entered the ancient sect and saw the 3 sword scars on the stone tablet. He would definitely choose a master. A master's guidance would help him improve faster. However, he had never had a master since the day he was born. Perhaps the super expert who created the heavenly creation skill could barely be counted as his master, but he had never really kowtowed to any master. Therefore, he would not choose his first master easily. His master should be able to guide his cultivation and, more importantly, his personality and strength had to make Jian Wushuang genuinely admire him. In the whole ancient sect, only one man was qualified, and that person was the palace master of Sword Palace, Xianxia. In the eternal world, a man could have 2, 3, or even more masters. The more masters the better, as long as his masters could help him with his cultivation. But Jian Wushuang was different. He came from the ancient world, where a warrior usually had only one master or two masters at most. The relationship between the master and disciple was very important. After all, as a warrior's strength grew stronger and stronger, many of his relatives and friends would gradually grow old and die. The ones who could still accompany him were usually his disciples or masters. Therefore, he would not choose a master easily. Both Palace Master Baiyu and Immortal have extremely high comprehension of the Tao, and they're definitely qualified to be my masters. However, I have no knowledge of their personalities. Jian Wushuang shook his head while pondering. In the whole ancient sect, the only person he admired both in strength and personality was Xianxia. Therefore, the only master he wanted to accept was Xianxia. He did not care if other people thought he was arrogant or conceited. As for the condition to become Xianxia's disciple, it might be impossible for other people to completely comprehend the three sword scars, but not for Jian Wushuang. He possessed the strongest sword soul and heaven-defying talent in sword principle. In addition, he had reached the heaven-treading realm, which meant his comprehension ability was currently at its highest. He was sure that he could fully comprehend the three sword scars. The first sword scar contains 9 sword movements, while the second one looks identical with the first one, but it actually contains 3 sword movements that originate from those 9 sword movements. The 3 sword scars were extremely enigmatic. The 9 sword movements in the first sword scar alone were extremely profound. For example, Zhu Lai, who had a certain level of talent in sword principle, still spent more than 10 years on the first sword scar before he fully comprehended the 9 sword movements. However, no one knew that Jian Wushuang had fully comprehended them in 2 months. Jian Wushuang had thoroughly comprehended the first sword scar. Took Zhu Lai more than 10 years to do it, but Jian Wushuang succeeded in only 2 months. He had already started meditating on the second sword scar. Jian Wushuang insisted on his belief and goal, continuing to cultivate while relying on his strongest sword soul and supreme talent that had been endowed to him by the heaven-treading realm and the heavenly creation skill. Time flew. No matter what the disciples in the ancient sect said about him, Jian Wushuang still cultivated and meditated alone. Half a year had elapsed since Jian Wushuang first entered the ancient sect. In front of the dark stone tablet at the sword tower, Jian Wushuang opened his eyes, which were sparkling with surprise. I finally succeeded. In the past 6 months, he had spent most of his time meditating in front of the sword tower. 4 months ago, he had already fully comprehended the first sword scar. The second sword scar should be far more difficult to comprehend than the first one for ordinary experts. But Jian Wushuang had reached the heaven-treading realm and had a terrifying level of talent in comprehension. For months after Jian Wushuang fully comprehended the first sword scar, he had also completely comprehended the second one. Palace Master Xianxia will give a lecture in the sword tower 2 days from now. It's a good time for me to have finished comprehending the second sword scar. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly, and then turned to inspect the third sword scar, the last sword scar. This sword scar, Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. He thought the 3 sword scars were exactly the same half a year ago. However, after he comprehended the first one, he felt the second and third were different. The second sword scar contained 3 sword movements that originated from the 9 movements in the first one. The third sword scar contained 1 sword movement, which was the integration of the 9 sword movements. So, naturally, the third sword scar was the most difficult. It took me half a year to fully comprehend the first and second sword scar. I wonder how long it'll take me to comprehend the third one. Jian Wushuang thought, and then continued to meditate. The next day, a woman with sky-blue hair and a beautiful face was sitting on the highest platform in the huge martial arts practice field of the Sword Palace. Many disciples from the Sword Palace had gathered around her and were listening carefully to her lecture. This absolute beauty was the second Vice Palace Master of Sword Palace, Ling Yu. When Jian Wushuang first came to the ancient sect half a year ago, Ling Yu also expressed her wish to accept Jian Wushuang as her personal disciple, but she was rejected by Jian Wushuang. Ling Yu quickly finished her lecture and was about to leave when Jian Wushuang stood up. Vice Palace Master. Jian Wushuang appeared in front of Ling Yu and bowed slightly. Jian Wushuang. Ling Yu glanced at him, her beautiful eyebrows slightly raising. She had been shocked by Jian Wushuang's talent. However, Jian Wushuang had not chosen a master from the ancient sect even now, so he had been pegged as being proud and conceited. Many experts, including her, were disappointed with him. If Jian Wushuang had chosen me, Palace Master Baiyu, or Palace Master Immortal as his master, he would have already reached a new level. Nevertheless, he chose to cultivate by himself. It's unlikely that he'll make great progress during this period of time. It can be said that he wasted half a year, Lingyu thought, shaking her head slightly. Although it was a pity, she would not force him to change his mind. Everyone had to make their own choices and follow their own path in life. Since Jian Wushuang chose to refuse the offer of her and the other experts, they would not insist no matter how talented he was. Jian Wushuang, what can I do for you? Lingyu asked. Well, I've been meditating on the 3 sword scars left by Palace Master Xianxia, and I had some comprehensions yesterday, Jian Wushuang said. Oh, Lingyu raised her eyebrows. The Sword Palace disciples on the martial arts practice field turned to Jian Wushuang in surprise. Some comprehensions? Has he fully comprehended the first sword scar in just half a year? Impossible. The 3 sword scars left by Palace Master Xianxia are so enigmatic. Even the 9 sword movements contained in the first sword scar are so profound. Even though Jian Wushuang has an extremely high gift in sword principle, it's impossible for him to fully comprehend the first sword scar in half a year. I've been meditating on the first sword scar for nearly 20 years and have only just mastered the 7th sword movement. Did he expect to comprehend the 9 sword movements in half a year? He must be joking. All the Sword Palace disciples here knew how enigmatic the 3 sword scars left by Palace Master Xianxia were. In their view, it was not possible to fully understand the first sword scar in only half a year. Even Lingyu was a little surprised, but she still said, "Display it to us." Yes. Jian Wushuang nodded his head. As he turned over his palm, the heart-killing sword appeared in his hand. The disciples surrounding Jian Wushuang immediately stepped backward. Without much preparation, Jian Wushuang just took a deep breath and then started. He waved his sword and began executing the 3 sword movements. The first sword stroke was a straight stab, and the blade possessed an unprecedented sharpness that seemed to tear through everything. As it swept through the space in front of him, the air began to hum softly. The second sword stroke was a harsh chop. Endless power was accumulated at a point and then burst out in an instant, giving off the impression that it was invincible and could destroy anything. Then he released a sword slash. This stroke was extremely dazzling and seemed to contain a special magic power. Even Vice Palace Master Lingyu could not help being attracted when by the slashing movement of this long sword. He displayed the 3 sword strokes, one after the other, without pause. Then he stopped. The whole martial arts practice field fell into complete silence. The sword principal disciples were endlessly shocked. Some were stunned while others were full of doubts and had a hint of ridicule written on their faces. Just 3 sword movements? As expected. The first sword scar contains 9 sword movements, but he only displays 3. His sword movements looked strong, but he's still far from fully mastering the 9 sword movements. A disciple who had a shallow comprehension of the first sword scar said sarcastically. Just as he finished speaking, "Shut up!" Zhu Lai, who stood next to the disciple, scolded him in a low voice. "You idiot! Don't speak nonsense when you don't understand." "What do you mean?" The disciple was confused, but he quickly realized that other disciples, as well as Vice Palace Master Lingyu, were staring at Jian Wushuang in astonishment. The next moment, the audience burst out in an uproar. 3 sword movements? They're the 3 sword movements from the second sword scar. How is that possible? The disciples who had some knowledge of the 3 sword scars were stunned. Even Vice Palace Master Lingyu was full of unprecedented shock. Just now they had doubted whether Jian Wushuang could display the 9 sword movements contained in the first sword scar. But Jian Wushuang had only displayed 3 sword movements, but they originated from the integration of the 9 sword movements. That was to say, not only had Jian Wushuang fully comprehended the first sword scar, he had also comprehended the second one. Just half a year. He had comprehended the first and second sword scar in just half a year. God! Among the crowd, Zhu Lai opened his eyes wide and stared at Jian Wushuang. I've been meditating on the 3 sword scars this whole time. It took me over 10 years to fully comprehend the first one, but it's too difficult to integrate the 9 sword movements into 3 movements. It will take me at least dozens of years or hundreds of years. Jian Wushuang, senior brother Wushuang. Has he fully comprehended the first and second sword scar in just half a year? Zhu Lai was in a complete daze. Vice Palace Master Ling Yu, have I reached the requirements? Jian Wushuang looked up at Ling Yu, who was standing on the high platform. Ling Yu finally recovered from the shock. She glanced at Jian Wushuang in horror and immediately nodded. Palace Master has said that those who comprehend the first sword scar are qualified to listen to his lecture in the sword tower. Those who comprehend the second one can be his nominal disciple. Since you've completely comprehended the second sword scar, you can be his disciple now. I'll send a message to Palace Master Xianxia right now. Thank you, Jian Wushuang said. Ling Yu took a deep breath and then took out a messaging slip. Palace Master Xianxia. Ling Yu had just begun to talk. I already know. I'll be lecturing in the sword tower tomorrow. Tell him to come. Xianxia had already responded. I see. Ling Yu turned to Jian Wushuang and said, Palace Master Xianxia has replied. He said for you to go to the sword tower and attend his lecture tomorrow. He'll have some arrangements for you. Jian Wushuang nodded and then left the sword palace without paying any attention to the awe and admiration in the gazes of the disciples around him. He headed directly towards Enlightenment Mountain. However, at the moment, in the sky above the sword palace, a man was standing quietly, his eyes gazing through the endless void at Jian Wushuang, who was walking slowly toward Enlightenment Mountain. In just half a year, he has completely comprehended the second sword scar. He really is the owner of the strongest sword soul. The white-robed Xianxia stood there with his hands behind his back and a gentle smile on his face. Sword soul was determined by the person's talent in sword principle. The stronger the sword soul was, the higher their gift in sword principle was. The strongest sword soul meant that Jian Wushuang's talent for sword principle was matchless in the world. So it was only natural that it was not difficult for a genius with such an amazing talent in sword principle to fully comprehend his sword scars. This boy is good at sword principle, possesses the strongest sword soul, and he has long since decided to choose me as his master. The moment he entered the ancient sect, he already understood himself and had chosen his path. Even if many of the experts in the ancient sect think his choice is wrong, as long as he thinks it's right, he'll persist. No matter how others think of him, he insists on his own choice. He may look stupid and stubborn. However, such a person has real willpower. What's more, he has the strongest sword soul, so he has a good reason to be so confident. Everyone thought that it would take him a long time to comprehend the 3 sword scars, but it only took him half a year to fully comprehend 2 of them. He's very confident and I like his confidence. It seems like I'll have another disciple soon. Xianxia murmured to himself, but the smile on his face showed that he was very satisfied with Jian Wushuang. He brought Jian Wushuang, Feng, and Huaying back from the Firmament Territory feast. He had watched their growth in the ancient sect during the past half year. Even though Jian Wushuang was thought to be wasting his talent in the eyes of the numerous experts in the ancient sect, Xianxia did not show up and try to persuade him to change his mind. He wanted to see whether Jian Wushuang could persist with his own choice and not be affected by others. It had been proven that the choice Jian Wushuang made was right. On that same day, the news that Jian Wushuang had completely comprehended the first and second sword scars, left by Palace Master Xianxia, spread through the whole ancient sect. Those who had thought Jian Wushuang was too proud and conceited were immediately dumbfounded. They never dreamed that Jian Wushuang's gift in sword principle would be so high. Recalling Jian Wushuang's behavior in the past half year, no one dared to say that he was conceited anymore. There was a thin line between confidence and conceit. If Jian Wushuang did not succeed in half a year or if his future performance was mediocre, it could be said that he was conceited, but now Jian Wushuang had given those people a severe slap in the face. Jian Wushuang had absolute confidence in his own choice. Since he had comprehended the second sword scar in just half a year, who could guarantee that he would not comprehend the third one in the future? Once he comprehended it, He would be the personal disciple of Palace Master Xianyi and would definitely have limitless prospects with Xianyi's personal guidance. Palace Master Xianyi. Many disciples in the ancient sect were jealous of Jian Wushuang. Palace Master Xianyi had a very supreme and special position in the ancient sect. One of the important reasons that the ancient sect, as a top sect, was able to surpass the three magnates to some extent was the existence of Palace Master Xianyi. Many experts in the ancient sect were proficient in various weapon daos, but only Palace Master Xianyi was able to establish Sword Palace. Everyone in the ancient sect knew about the strength and mystery of Palace Master Xianyi. They all dreamed of being his disciple, but the requirement was too harsh. The experts who knew that Jian Wushuang wanted to be the disciple of Palace Master Xianyi looked down on his choice, as Xianyi's condition was too harsh and it would take a long time for Jian Wushuang to achieve it. But now, in only half a year, Jian Wushuang had become Xianyi's nominal disciple. His achievement filled people with envy and admiration. The next day, Sword Tower opened. Since Palace Master Xianyi would be giving a lecture in person, all the Sword Principal disciples who had completely comprehended the first Sword Scar went to the Sword Tower. Inside the Sword Tower, over 20 Sword Principal disciples sat cross-legged in the open space. Naturally, Jian Wushuang was among them. Before long, a white-robed Xianyi appeared at the top of the Sword Tower. Everyone immediately quieted down. Xianyi looked around at all the people below and nodded slightly, then directly started teaching. Swords are predominantly for killing. You can use the sword tip to stab, the sword edge to chop, the sword back to block, and the sword blade to slash. It can be said that the sword is a moderate weapon, as it can be used to attack and defend. It's comprehensive and balanced. Sword principle is the way of killing, broad and profound. Sword soul is just the beginning of sword principle. Awakening the sword soul means that you're qualified to meditate on sword principle. That's to say, no matter how strong your sword soul is, you still have not mastered sword principle. The real sword principle is based on the sword heart. Sword heart. Jian Wushuang was listening carefully. The explanation on sword principle by Xianyi was completely different from that of Vice Palace Master Nye and Lingyu. The sword principle explained by Palace Master Xianyi was a process from simplicity to complexity, like a tree that gradually evolved from a common seedling to a towering tree. It was very profound and complicated. Jian Wushuang and other disciples present could not fully understand all the things being explained by Xianyi, but the part which they understood benefited them greatly. Every word from the mouth of Palace Master Xianyi seemed to contain special magic and directly explained the essence of sword principle. Currently, inside Sword Tower, every disciple was fascinated by his words, including Jian Wushuang. Palace Master Xianyi kept teaching for one whole day and night. The greatest sword principle starts from simplicity, then strives for complexity, but eventually returns to simplicity. When he reached this point, Xianyi finally stopped. Most of the disciples who attended the lecture below had fallen into meditation. It was only after a while that they finally recovered themselves. Their faces were full of pleasure and regret. They were pleased because Xianyi had talked directly about the essence of sword principle, which benefited them a lot. They had also learned many things which they had never thought of before. It was much better than what Vice Palace Master Nye and Lingyu taught them. They felt regret because Palace Master Xianyi rarely gave lectures. He usually only gave a lecture once a year or sometimes even once every few years. The opportunity was too rare. Jian Wushuang. Palace Master Xianyi looked down. Jian Wushuang had just woken up from the meditation when he heard Palace Master Xianyi call his name. He immediately stood up and stepped forward. Palace Master Xianyi. Jian Wushuang greeted him with a hint of humility. When I left the 3 sword scars outside of the sword tower, I set some rules. Since you've completely comprehended the second sword scar, you're my nominal disciple from now on, Palace Master Xianyi said. Disciple Jian Wushuang pays respects to Master. Jian Wushuang immediately knelt down in front of Xianyi and respectfully kowtowed 3 times. Rise! Xianyi waved his hand. Jian Wushuang stood up immediately. Follow me. The rest of the people can leave, Xianyi said. The disciples inside Sword Tower immediately dispersed one after another, while Jian Wushuang followed Xianyi to the second floor of the sword tower. Jian Wushuang sat face to face with Xianyi at a long table as Xianyi looked at him with a gentle smile on his face. When you began to study the 3 sword scars, I knew I would have a new disciple. But I never expected it to be so soon, Xianyi smiled. In the ancient sect and even the entire firmament territory, only you can comprehend the second sword scar in half a year as you possess the strongest sword soul. Jian Wushuang was shocked by his words. Master, you knew? Jian Wushuang was surprised. After he came to the eternal world, he had never exposed his strongest sword soul in front of people. Even at the firmament territory feast, he only exerted 80% of his sword soul power when he fought with Gong Chao because he did not want people to find out about his strongest sword soul. He had thought that he hid it well. He never expected that Palace Master Xianyi had discovered the existence of his strongest sword soul long ago. The moment I saw you, my sword heart was provoked, so I immediately knew that your sword soul was extraordinary, Xianyi explained with a smile. At that time, only my doppelganger went to the firmament territory feast, so I was not sure whether you owned the strongest sword soul. However, when you arrived at the ancient sect and my original body saw you, I became certain that you indeed possess the strongest sword soul which make all sword principal warriors envious. Make all sword principal warriors envious? Jian Wushuang smiled silently and then nodded his assent. Sword soul determined one's gift in sword principle. Jian Wushuang's strongest sword soul represented that he had the strongest gift in sword principle, which was sufficient to fill any sword principle warrior with envy and admiration. Even though you're just my nominal disciple, I'll try my best to guide you. Xianyi looked at Jian Wushuang and asked, in the past half year, you spent most of your energy meditating on the 3 sword scars. But I guess you've also improved your comprehension of the Tao, right? I did improve it to some extent. Jian Wushuang nodded and said, I've been comprehending the world Tao and slaughter Tao simultaneously. I've fully comprehended the second occult of the world Tao and have a basic understanding of the third occult. I also comprehended the second occult of the slaughter Tao a few days ago. Half a year. In the past half year, Jian Wushuang stayed in the sword tower to meditate on the sword scars in the daytime and returned to Enlightenment Mountain to comprehend the Tao at night. His comprehension of the Tao while at Enlightenment Mountain was 3 times quicker than it would be outside. With the talent endowed by the heaven-treading realm, his 2 original bodies had made amazing progress in just half a year. For example, after Feng became the disciple of Palace Master Destruction, he received personal guidance from Palace Master Destruction and some cultivation resources which Palace Master Destruction acquired for him. However, he had only comprehended the second occult of the Destruction Tao, which was slower than Jian Wushuang. Without any instruction and cultivation resources, it's very impressive for you to have made such progress with only the use of Enlightenment Mountain in the past half year. Xianyi nodded slightly and then said solemnly, I'm not proficient in the world Tao or the slaughter Tao. I can't compare with Palace Master Baiyu and Immortal in terms of comprehension on these 2 Taos. Nevertheless, my vision is far broader than them. There are many resources in the ancient sect that could be of great help to your cultivation, but very few of them actually suit you. I'll apply for a batch of cultivation resources for you according to your actual situation. Go back to Enlightenment Mountain and wait. I'll have those resources delivered to you soon. Thank you, Master. Jian Wushuang expressed his gratitude. Go back and continue your cultivation. Don't disgrace me in the sect competition which is being held 1.5 years from now, Xianyi said. Yes. Jian Wushuang nodded solemnly and left. Xianyi sat alone in the sword tower. He thought, this little boy is extremely talented. He's reached this level in the world Tao and slaughter Tao while comprehending sword principle. Among the treasures which are suitable for him, which ones should I choose? He began to select resources for Jian Wushuang. As he said, he might not have the same understanding towards the world Tao and slaughter Tao as Palace Masters Baiyu and Immortal did. But his vision was extremely broad. He knew which treasures were useful and beneficial for Jian Wushuang, as well as which ones were a waste. He quickly made up his mind. The 9-world picture, which dissects the 9 occults of the world Tao into various world essences, is the most suitable resource for this little boy to comprehend the world Tao. In terms of slaughter Tao, the slaughter book, left by Zhuo Ming, should be sufficient. As for sword principle, he has a deep comprehension of sword principle now. If he wants to go further, he has to condense his sword heart. It's too difficult, so it's impossible for him in a short period of time. He doesn't need any resources for the cultivation of sword principle right now. Listening to the lectures or meditating on the third sword scar is enough for him. I'll give him a Tao origin fruit. That will be sufficient for him to keep cultivating for a while. Not long after Jian Wushuang returned to Enlightenment Mountain, he received the cultivation resources which Xianxia acquired for him. 9-world picture, slaughter book, and a Tao origin fruit. He was shocked at the cultivation resources. They were all useful for his comprehension of the Tao. The 9-world picture and slaughter book were used to assist his cultivation in the world Tao and slaughter Tao. As for the Tao origin fruit, Jian Wushuang was no stranger to the Tao origin fruit. During the Firmament Territory Feast, the first prize of the third-round arena battle was 1 million divine gems and, more importantly, a Tao origin fruit. It was a precious treasure which could help in comprehending the Tao. Even in a top sect like the ancient sect where there were numerous Tao origin fruits, they were still highly valued. Jian Wushuang was allocated a Tao origin fruit because of Xianxia and his own amazing talent. Especially the fact that he comprehended 2 of the sword scars within half a year had shocked the whole ancient sect. So the high officials agreed to give him a Tao origin fruit after discussing it. Under normal circumstances, even personal disciples of palace masters could not receive a Tao origin fruit if they had not shown amazing talent. As for the 9-world picture and slaughter book, the slaughter book was the record of the slaughter Tao comprehension experiences of an eternal realm expert named Zhuo Ming, who had completely comprehended the 9 occults of the slaughter Tao. Each of the 101 words in the slaughter book contained concepts related to the occults of the slaughter Tao. Jian Wushuang could comprehend the slaughter Tao by reading each word in the book. The slaughter book is similar to the 6-story pagoda that was given to me by Elder Di Jing. The 6-story pagoda is more complicated and involves a wider range. The slaughter book is simpler, but every word is extremely profound. Jian Wushuang thought with a surprised smile on his face. He already had the 6-story pagoda to help him comprehend the slaughter Tao. Now, he also had the slaughter book, which would make his comprehension even easier. As for the 9-world picture, the 9-world picture was even more wonderful. It contained 9 pictures: a flower, a tuft of grass, a stone, a tree, a lake, a mountain, a piece of cloud, a drop of water, and a person. They all seemed to be simple and ordinary. However, after careful observation, Jian Wushuang discovered that each picture was a complete world. 9 pictures that were equal to 9 complete worlds and were full of concepts on the occults. The 9-world picture consists of 9 paintings in total, and each of them represents an occult of the world Tao. Among the paintings, I've comprehended the occults of the 2 with a flower and a leaf drawn on it. I'll need to work on the remaining 7. Jian Wushuang thought to himself as he hung the remaining 7 paintings on the wall. He then sat down with his legs crossed and began to observe the 3rd painting, on which there was only a pebble. However, as he continued to stare at it, he discovered that the pebble was, in fact, a small world, containing many laws of the universe and the nature of the world Tao. What he needed to do was to comprehend those laws and nature. It's wonderful. Jian Wushuang brightened up at the thought of how much faster he could comprehend the world Tao now with those paintings as reference. Now, I have the paintings to help me comprehend the world Tao. The 6-story pagoda and slaughter book will help me comprehend the slaughter Tao. I also have Enlightenment Mountain and a Tao origin fruit at hand. I'm like a fish in the sea. His eyes flickered. Master has tried his best to acquire sufficient resources for my cultivation, so I can't slack off in the remaining year and a half before the sect competition begins. I really want to see how much progress I can make in this period of time. He swallowed the Tao origin fruit on that same day and started cultivating with the resources he had been given. Since then, he had spent most his days in the Enlightenment Mountain meditating. Sometimes he would go to the Sword Palace or the Tao Palace and listen to the lectures, and he never missed one of Xianxia's lectures. If he was confused about something, he would ask his master for help. The arrival of winter signaled that 2 years had elapsed since Jian Wushuang first entered ancient sect. One day, he was sitting down on a peak, which towered up into the clouds, with the white-robed Xianxia beside him. Master, I can feel that I've reached the threshold in sword principle. So why do I kept failing to condense even one trace of sword heart? Jian Wushuang asked Xianxia with a frown. Because your heart is not really at peace. Xianxia smiled at him. The most important aspect of sword heart is the sword, but you can't leave out the heart. Your success will depend on both. So calm down and let it be. Understood. Jian Wushuang nodded. The sect competition will begin tomorrow. Are you ready for it? Xianxia added while looking at him. Yes. Jian Wushuang gave him a smile. In fact, he had nothing he needed to prepare in advance. His power was all that he would rely on in this competition. You look confident. I shall await your success. Xianxia grinned and continued. Show us your power as much as you can. Only in this way can I help you acquire more resources. I will. Jian Wushuang nodded. Then go. Xianxia waved his hand. Jian Wushuang bowed to him and left. Watching Jian Wushuang's back, Xianxia had an inscrutable smile on his face. He has better perception than anyone I've met. He really is incredibly gifted. Not long after Jian Wushuang came back to Enlightenment Mountain, Huaying presented himself at his door. Jian Wushuang, have you heard that Feng managed to break into the 6th level of the Dao Tower today? After taking a seat at a table, Huaying spoke seriously to Jian Wushuang. Really? Jian Wushuang was surprised. Dao Tower was a place used to test the disciples' comprehension in the Dao. He heard that 3 were 13 levels in total, and the better one's comprehension in the Dao, the further he could go in the tower. When Jian Wushuang had just entered the ancient sect and possessed a little comprehension in the Dao, he had once taken the test in the tower as well. However, at that time he was only able to make it to level 3. It's very difficult for a disciple who has comprehended the 3rd occult to make it to level 6. But Feng did it. He must have comprehended the 3rd and maybe even the 4th occult. He has made a lot of progress in these 2 years. Jian Wushuang was lost in thought for some time before replying to Huaying. Feng is indeed talented. He is more than just talented. Huaying echoed his words. His master has said that he is well-grounded and only lacking resources, which is why he had cultivated slowly when he was in the ancient world. However, now that he has entered the ancient sect, he has progressed faster and faster while depending on his previous accumulations. In these 2 years, his power has skyrocketed. Now, everyone in our sect has learned of his power. Surely, he will be able to keep his place in Enlightenment Mountain during the sect competition tomorrow. I agree. Jian Wushuang nodded. It was clear to him and everyone else in the sect that Feng could keep his place as an inner disciple in tomorrow's competition. As for the other competitors, few of them had made it to the 4th occult and, therefore, could not be his match. Alas, I really envy him. Huaying looked worried as he continued speaking. As for me, I've only comprehended the 2nd occult and can only be ranked in the middle among all the outer disciples. I'm afraid I will no longer be an inner disciple after tomorrow, and won't be able to return to Enlightenment Mountain for a long time. He looked toward Jian Wushuang and continued, Jian Wushuang, with Xianxia as your master, over the last 2 years, I reckon you've progressed no less than Feng has. Are you sure that you can survive tomorrow's competition? Well, not quite. Jian Wushuang thought he should be humble. Not quite. Huaying shot him an odd glance but continued, Anyway, it's better than having no chance. You're not like me. I know I'll be removed from the list of inner disciples tomorrow. Jian Wushuang could not find any words to reply with, so he sighed in secret. Huaying was the weakest one among the 6 from the ancient world. Relying on the resources in the ancient sect, he had progressed a lot, but he was still far from being Feng's match. In fact, Jian Wushuang did have some confidence in tomorrow's sect competition. The heavenly creation skill is amazingly helpful. I have been able to cultivate 10 times faster than before since I reached the heaven-treading realm. This has been the most efficient period of my life so far. At my current level, I can roll through Feng and the other disciples. Jian Wushuang thought to himself. With Xianxia as his master, possessing treasures like the Nine-World Picture, Slaughter Book, and a Dao origin fruit. All of this contributed to his making achievements that were beyond belief at the time. Not to mention that he also had 2 original bodies cultivating separately at Enlightenment Mountain. He was confident that he could defeat Feng and the other disciples in the competition. It all depends on tomorrow. A light of firmness flashed in Jian Wushuang's eyes as he clenched his hands. The next day, the 10-year sect competition began. The whole sect was bustling with people. This competition was the only way that outer disciples could become inner disciples, so they valued this chance very much. They were dying for the opportunity to cultivate at Enlightenment Mountain like the inner disciples because it meant they could cultivate 3 times faster than in other places. The rules for the competition were quite simple. The top 10 outer disciples and the 10 weakest from among the inner disciples would fight each other for the 10 empty positions to be inner disciples. At first light, the fight among the outer disciples began and the list of the top 10 was released at noon. As for their opponents, the masters directly appointed 10 inner disciples to fight against them, including Jian Wushuang, Feng, and Huaying. At one of the sect's large martial arts practice fields, which was used to hold competitions, the 10 outer disciples and 10 inner disciples stood at the center of the field, surrounded by many other disciples who desired to watch the battles. 10 outer disciples and 10 inner disciples. Jian Wushuang looked around and saw many new faces. He had spent the last 2 years cultivating alone, so he had little contacts with others. Nevertheless, he had heard some things about them from his talks with Feng and Huaying. Overall, the outer disciples were powerful, and some of them had comprehended up to the 3rd occult. Jian Wushuang believed the top 10 must have at least reached that level. While looking around, he noticed a bronze-skinned burly man with a fierce aura. The man was called Luo Yong and he was recognized as the number 1 among all the outer disciples. Rumors had it that he had comprehended the 5th occult. Besides that man, there was a white-clothed woman who also caught many eyes. She was named Donger. Even though she was regarded as being the weakest among the inner disciples, she was, in fact, very powerful and had comprehended the 5th occult. There seemed to be a very good chance that those 2 would win a place as inner disciples. The same was true for Feng. Apart from them, there were several other geniuses who might succeed in the competition as well. As for the rest of them, it remained to be seen. Jian Wushuang was among the rest. This was because he had been immersed in cultivating and had not battled against the others over the years or adventured in the Dao Tower. No one knew how strong he really was. The competition is about to start. But how will it start? The onlookers discussed in confusion. Generally, the sect competition would be decided by many rounds of fighting, but it wasn't the same every year. Right then, a stunning figure appeared on the field. It was no other than the vice master of Sword Palace, Ling Yu, Jian Wushuang's acquaintance. She was the hostess of the competition. As soon as she landed on the field, she crushed a token and a huge wormhole immediately appeared before everyone's eyes. Her voice then echoed. This time, the sect competition will be held inside the 9th Heaven Road. The words caused an uproar among the audience. 9th Heaven Road. This is beyond my expectation. Haha. Those competitors have a lot suffering ahead of them as they walk through those 31 floors. 9th Heaven Road is a separate space, so we won't be able to see their performance, only their final results. What a pity, the onlookers sighed. Jian Wushuang had heard of the 9th Heaven Road before. It had 31 floors in total with an obstacle on each floor. The more powerful one was the higher he could reach. The 9th Heaven Road had been used several times before during the sect competition, and it had been proven that it could test the disciples' power by having all 20 disciples climb the floors together. Jian Wushuang, you must have progressed a lot, right? Feng suddenly looked toward Jian Wushuang and asked. Jian Wushuang seemed surprised by this question. Just a bit. Well, let's see who can go further in this competition, Feng added. Okay. Jian Wushuang nodded with a smile. This wormhole leads to the 9th Heaven Road. Go ahead and enter, Ling Yu said to the 20 competitors. The competitors immediately entered the wormhole without hesitation. The moment Jian Wushuang entered it, he found himself in front of a towering mountain. The mountain looked like it had been thrust into the clouds, with no end in sight and only a long path leading to its peak. While staring at the path in front of him, he spotted several figures standing a short distance away, but they had no signs of life. The 10 figures were black armored puppet fighters, each armed with a long black spear, and they appeared to be guarding the path forward. After glancing at them, Jian Wushuang began to walk forward, along the path. However, the moment his foot touched the first floor, the 10 puppet fighters all opened their eyes and stared at him emotionlessly. The next moment, whoosh, 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 the puppet fighters all charged at him at the same time. Then, after drawing near, they all attacked him with their spears. Swish, 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 swish. A cold light emanated from the spears and they appeared as if they could pierce through anything. Jian Wushuang watched calmly as the spear attacks quickly approached him, waiting until the last moment to make his move. The heart-killing sword was already in his hand as he slashed out with a dazzling flash of sword light, at a speed that greatly exceeded the incoming spears as it passed the throats of the puppet fighters. With a single strike, he had defeated all the puppet fighters, who then moved back and opened up the path for him. It seems that the obstacle on the first floor is not that difficult. Jian Wushuang smiled and looked forward as he moved on along the path. The puppets that guarded each floor of the 9th Heaven Road were in the same realm as their challengers. Since Jian Wushuang was in the skyscraping realm, the 10 puppet fighters he encountered were at that realm as well. Among the 20 challengers, those who had reached the divine realm would have to face puppet fighters that possessed the same power as a divine realm expert. As a result, the game was fair to everyone. The challengers could only depend on their comprehension of the Dao, skill, and offensive ability. A moment later, Jian Wushuang arrived at the 2nd floor. Again, there were 10 puppet fighters waiting for him. They were more powerful than the previous 10, but it did not change their fate. As Jian Wushuang continued on, he effortlessly passed through the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floor. However, when he reached the 6th floor, things changed. He found out that there was a qualitative leap in terms of the puppet fighter's power on this floor. However, they were still unable to prevent him from moving forward. The 6th floor, the 7th, the 8th, Jian Wushuang continued on. At the same time, in a big hall of the ancient sect, many palace masters and vice palace masters had gathered together, including Xianxia. They were watching the progress of the 20 disciples challenging the 9th Heaven Road. They're moving so fast. Yeah, because it's just the beginning. They will slow down as they go further, especially once they reach the 16th floor. The puppet fighter's power becomes a level stronger every 5 floors, and the 16th floor, which is the middle of the path, is a big obstacle for the challengers. They will all be forced to slow down at that floor. These masters chatted casually while smiling. Things went just as expected. At the first, the 20 disciples were breaking through the blockades very quickly, but as they continued moving forward, they were all forced to slow down. When they finally reached the 16th floor, 19 of them made it to the next floor while only one person failed. That person was Huaying. It's obvious that Huaying tried his best. Generally speaking, only those who have comprehended the 3rd occult can defeat the puppet fighters on that floor. He was lucky to even make it that far given his level of power, one of the vice palace masters commented. Among the 6 geniuses Xianxia brought back from the Firmament Territory feast, Huaying was the weakest, but he has a determined mind. It's possible that he may reach the superior divine realm in the future. Huaying was the first one to be thrown out of the wormhole. He displayed a bitter smile under the watchful eyes of the onlookers. He had expected his result, but when the time came, he still could not help feeling embarrassed and frustrated. He had nobody to blame but himself. The remaining 19 disciples continued moving forward, even though most of them visibly became slower after the 16th floor. All of them except for Luo Yong and Donger. These two had comprehended the 4th occult and were much more powerful than the others. Look, Luo Yong has made it to the 20th floor and is still moving at a fast pace. He has not reached his limit yet, so I guess that he should be able to at least make it past the 24th floor. I agree, but I think he will fail to break through the 25th floor. Donger's situation is similar. The masters in the hall all knew very well about the puppet fighter's power. Therefore, based on their disciples' strength, they knew how far they could go. In their eyes, Luo Yong and Donger could definitely break through the 24th floor. As for the others, they also had their judgments on them. Palace Master Destruction, your personal disciple Feng is brilliant. It seemed easy for him to make it to the 18th floor, so I reckon he will get to the 21st floor. The voice came from a black-clothed lady. She was Palace Master Ming Xian, one of the 13 Palace Masters in the sect and an expert in the Light Dao. Haha! This boy really surprised me with his progress. As things stand, he should be able to challenge those top disciples now. However, I still don't think he can break through to the 21st floor. The 20th floor sounds more realistic. Even so, he will still be able to keep his place among inner disciples. Someone chimed in. They could tell most of the 19 disciples would not even make it to the 20th floor, so for Feng to make it that far was already quite excellent. Hey! Has anyone been paying attention to Jian Wushuang? An icy voice suddenly echoed out. It came from Palace Master Mo Tao, who was good at slaughter Dao and had once wanted to take Jian Wushuang as his personal disciple. Jian Wushuang. On hearing his words, the others immediately looked toward Jian Wushuang and narrowed their eyes. Jian Wushuang was busy fighting the 10 puppet fighters on the 17th floor. One moment he moved like a shadow, but in the next moment he was like a sharp sword. Even under the attacks from his 10 opponents, he was still able to easily dodge them all. Brilliant! What great swordsmanship! His skill is simple and pure. Every time he strikes, he defuses the puppet fighter's attacks. With swordsmanship, it's always the simpler, the better. Good boy. He's quite talented to have such brilliant skills at such a young age, and he is very close to condensing his sword heart. He deserves to be Xian Yi's nominal disciple. The masters all looked toward Xian Yi unconsciously. They all thought it was because of Xian Yi's guidance that Jian Wushuang was able to make such huge progress. Xian Yi revealed a causal smile to their way of praising his disciple. He knew very well that it was Jian Wushuang's gift in sword principle, not him, that had benefited Jian Wushuang the most. This boy... Palace Master Ming Xian could not help frowning as she watched Jian Wushuang. Back when Jian Wushuang refused to be a disciple of Palace Masters Baiyu and Mo Tao, his behavior had displeased many of the masters. Ming Xian was one of them. In her eyes, Jian Wushuang was too proud and arrogant. She even had disparaged him while chatting with other masters. However, soon after that, to her surprise, Jian Wushuang comprehended the second sword scar left by Xian Yi and became his nominal disciple, which had been a big blow to her. After that, she began to dislike Jian Wushuang even more. He is only good at sword principle. However, there are so many other things that matter in Ninth Heaven Road other than sword principle. Judging by his current power, he might not be able to break through the 18th floor, and he has to make it to the 19th floor to keep his position as Xian Yi's nominal disciple, Ming Xian said in a mocking tone. The others in the hall smiled at her words but remained silent. Xian Yi, who was standing beside her, kept quiet regarding the discussion and just stared at Jian Wushuang with a smile. He is trying to find his limits in sword principle and take this chance to condense his sword heart. So, up till now, he has only used his cultivation in sword principle without applying world Dao and slaughter Dao. However, condensing a sword heart is not easy. After the 17th floor, he will have to use all of his power. On the 17th floor of the 9th Heaven Road, when Jian Wushuang brandished his sword, there was a flurry of blows, both smooth and elaborate. It seemed like he was battling the puppet fighters effortlessly and even trying to make fun of them, but only he knew that he was at his limit. Indeed, it's quite difficult to condense my sword heart. I will have to wait until there is a better opportunity. Jian Wushuang smiled while looking around at all the puppet fighters. Then his eyes became sharp. Master told me that the better I perform in this competition, the more resources he can obtain for me. From this moment on, I'll stop restraining my power. I really want to see how far I can make it. The next moment, a sliver of light flashed in his eyes and he released a burst of killing intent. Whoosh! He moved forward like a ghost while striking out with his sword. This move caused a dazzlingly stunning sword light to flash across the sky, which then swept past all the puppet fighters' throats. The 10 puppet fighters were defeated in an instant. When he arrived on the 18th floor, he struck at his targets like lightning. This time, he used his world energy. The moment he struck out, everything seemed to freeze. The 10 puppet fighters on this floor were defeated without struggling. The puppet fighters on the 19th floor suffered the same result. In just a short amount of time, Jian Wushuang had made it to the 20th floor. Jian Wushuang is excellent when it comes to sword skill, but it doesn't mean his comprehension of the Tao is good. Palace Master Ming Xian poured out her words, but when she saw Jian Wushuang quickly break through the 17th, 18th, and 19th floor in an instant, she was struck dumb and the others were astonished as well. He is so fast. He was stuck on the 17th floor for a long time, wasn't he? How was he suddenly able to break through the 18th and 19th floor in the blink of an eye? The masters could not understand the sudden change. With only a strike on each floor, all the puppet fighters were defeated. Look at his sword! One of the vice palace masters suddenly cried out. The others immediately reacted to the voice and looked at the sword. They could see that all 10 puppet fighters on the 20th floor were diving towards Jian Wushuang aggressively. Then, almost at the same moment, Jian Wushuang made his move, which was followed by the release of an enormous amount of world energy. The floors that Jian Wushuang had passed were filled with dazzling sword light as his sword passed through the bodies of all the puppet fighters. He also cleared this floor with a single strike. How could this be possible? Palace Master Ming Xian's eyes were open wide, and there was a look of horror on her face. His swordsmanship is so terrifying. From his strike, I can tell that he has comprehended up to the 3rd occult and is only a step away from reaching the 4th occult. His comprehension of the world Tao is surprisingly high. There's still more. Look! Everyone's eyes were fixed on Jian Wushuang. Under their watchful gazes, Jian Wushuang made it to the 21st floor, on which the puppet fighters were much more powerful than those on the 20th floor. This time, he could not end the battle as quickly as before, but he was still able to overpower his opponents. His sword rushed, surrounded by sword light and carrying an air of killing intent. The mighty power of the world Tao and slaughter Tao were being completely demonstrated by his swordsmanship. Under such powerful attacks, the 10 puppet fighters were forced to retreat. Oh my God! His comprehension of the slaughter Tao is no less than that of the world Tao. Luo Yong and Donger may have reached a higher level in the Tao than Jian Wushuang, but that is just in a single Tao. Jian Wushuang has comprehended the 3rd occult in both the world Tao and slaughter Tao. What's more, his talent in sword principle is really impressive. I agree. Overall, I think he is more powerful than Luo Yong and Donger. These masters were experienced and knowledgeable, so they had a general idea of how powerful Jian Wushuang was. Because of that, they could not deny that in terms of cultivation in sword principle and the Tao, Jian Wushuang was the best among all 20 of the challengers. They believed that Jian Wushuang would actually be able to make it past the 25th floor, while Luo Yong and Donger would probably have to stop on the 25th floor. Monster! This boy has greatly advanced in his comprehension of the Tao over the last 2 years after entering our sect. He is a real super genius. Previously, we thought that he was being conceited, but it seems like we misunderstood him. Complex feelings overwhelmed the masters. Even up till this moment, Xianxia had remained silent. Jian Wushuang's performance on the 9th Heaven Road was within his expectations, so it was not that surprising. Jian Wushuang continued to break through and challenge higher floors. Just as the masters had expected, it did not take him much time to pass these floors and reach the 25th floor. At a glance, Jian Wushuang could tell that every puppet fighter on that floor was as powerful as the weakest divine realm experts. After exchanging several moves with them, he realized that the puppet fighters' attacks were more skillful and fierce than before. The puppet fighters surrounded him from all directions. Shoop! 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 A net of spear shadows moved towards him and completely surrounded him. He exerted the power of his sword soul to the extreme and moved forward as if he had become a sword himself. Meanwhile, his heart-killing sword struck out continuously, causing countless sword shadows to sweep through the surroundings. He easily deflected all the spear attacks that were directed towards him. The puppet fighters on this floor are superior to all the ones I've fought before, regardless of whether it's in power, speed, or skill. Not only that, they have good teamwork. It seems like I'll have to rely on some special methods to defeat them. I'll break through with pure power. Jian Wushuang's eyes sparkled. The very next moment, he withdrew the heart-killing sword, took a step backwards, and held the sword with both hands. An overwhelming sword essence continued gathering in the blade as he released a burst of killing intent. The entire space seemed to completely freeze at that moment. Violet Devastation sword skill. Swoosh! A dazzling and splendid bright purple light lit up the sky. Behind it was a terrifying killing intent sought to destroy everything. Jian Wushuang held his sword up with both hands and swung it at two puppet fighters rushing toward him. The puppet fighters' spears also struck out to meet the sword. Clang! Clang! Two crashes were heard, one after the other, and the spears were shattered. However, Jian Wushuang did not stop attacking them and finally defeated them. Jian Wushuang then moved toward the rest of the puppet fighters. Strike after strike, he displayed a brilliant swordsmanship that the puppet fighters could barely fight back against. A short while later, he passed the 25th floor and moved on to the next one. The senior experts in the hall all looked amazed when they saw Jian Wushuang's performance on the 25th floor. His power is so formidable. The skill he displayed just now should be a superior rank 3 secret skill. Wow, even those who have comprehended the fourth occult, like Luo Yong and Dong can't create a skill at that level, but Jian Wushuang actually did it. His cultivation in sword principle is amazingly high. One could create secret skills based on their comprehension of the Tao and weapons. Jian Wushuang might be weaker than Luo Yong and Dong in comprehending the Tao, but his cultivation of sword principle was far above theirs. That was why he could create the superior rank 3 secret skill, Violet Devastation sword skill. It was the most powerful move that he could currently perform. On the 26th floor of the 9th Heaven Road, Jian Wushuang faced 10 puppet fighters again, that were even more powerful than the previous ones. The moment the 10 puppet fighters started moving, Jian Wushuang was suppressed. They attacked him with impressive teamwork and forced him to continuously retreat. He is losing ground. Of course he is. Every puppet fighter on this floor is as powerful as a novice Divine Realm expert, and only someone above the level of an intermediate Divine Realm expert could withstand their attacks. He is only in the skyscraping realm, so it's already very impressive for him to make it this far. The 26th floor will be his limit. The expert side. Previously, they all thought that Jian Wushuang could make it to the 25th floor at best and that the 26th floor was beyond his reach. Xianxia had not shown any feelings towards Jian Wushuang's situation yet. He just stared at him in silence while thinking, "Boy, show me how far you can go." Under the puppet fighter's powerful attacks, Jian Wushuang was like a drowned mouse. "It looks it's time for me to go all out," he thought while narrowing his eyes. Then, in the next instant, there was a sudden increase in his physical strength. "Piss off!" He struck at the puppet fighter in front of him and forced it down, causing the puppet fighter to hit the ground and roll across the floor. Jian Wushuang then turned his sword towards the other puppet fighters and struck out at them like lightning. Clang! 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 After several sounds of metal colliding against metal, he beat them back a bit. Violet Cataclysm skill. Jian Wushuang's eyes sparkled and a purple light lit up the sky again. He forced another 3 puppet fighters to retreat. In just a moment, the 10 puppet fighters surrounded him were all beaten back. "I have been suppressing my power ever since I came to the eternal world. Not even once have I ever exposed my power to others during the last 2 years in the ancient sect, until this moment. It feels good to be able to go all out after so long." Jian Wushuang clenched his fists and felt the power surging within him. He had a flawless foundation and could release more power than others at the same level as him. Because of this, his body was stronger than other skyscraping realm experts. Overall, this made him more powerful than others. Even when compared to Divine Realm experts, he was just a little bit weaker. He had restrained his power this whole time, even when he fought with Gong Chao in the Firmament Territory Feast. Only now, on the 26th floor of the 9th Heaven Road, did he finally show his full power. For fear of arousing others' suspicion, I had hidden my real power from the prying eyes and ears at the Firmament Territory feast. But now, things are different. I have to show more power so I can get more resources from the sect. And the people here won't know that my incredible power is because of my foundation. To be precise, they won't be able to tell that I have a perfect foundation. Before taking part in the sect competition, Jian Wushuang had decided that he would do his utmost in order to obtain more resources from the sect. Come on! Jian Wushuang was thrilled. He held his sword in one hand and gazed at the puppet fighters with his overwhelming battle intent. Kill! He shouted and dived forward. The 10 puppet fighters rushed toward him as well. An instant later, he was locked in an intense fight with them again. However, this time he had the upper hand. When he attacked, there was a terrifying power behind every one of his exquisite moves. He knocked his opponents away with the full exertion of his power, his comprehension of the Tao, and his skill. He was at the peak of his battle strength. Bang! Jian Wushuang's sword collided with the weapon from one of puppet fighters and forced the puppet downward. Then he drew back his sword and quickly stabbed towards the puppet's throat. He was so fast that the puppet couldn't completely defend itself and got hit. 1 defeated, but there are still 9 left. Jian Wushuang smiled. Several minutes ago, he was being overpowered by the puppet fighters and could barely fight back. But now that he had decided to no longer restrain his power, he could battle them with ease. Things continued on in a good direction. One after another, Jian Wushuang quickly defeated the rest of the puppet fighters. Finally, he cleared the 26th floor. The senior experts were startled by the sudden change that occurred between Jian Wushuang and the puppet fighters. What's going on? His power greatly improved. How could he release so much more power in such a short amount of time? The experts were confused. They had thought that the 25th floor was Jian Wushuang's limit and that there was no way he could pass the 26th floor. So, what they had just witnessed was completely beyond their expectations. He is only in the skyscraping realm, yet he is as powerful as a divine realm expert. I think it should be because of his strong body. He must have practiced some secret skills to strengthen his body, which allowed him to exert more power than other skyscraping realm experts. Palace Master Destruction cried out in astonishment. His strong body? The experts stared at Jian Wushuang closely, no longer paying any attention to the other disciples. At that moment, they were concerned with Jian Wushuang the most. As they continued to watch, they realized it was true. Jian Wushuang had made it this far by relying on his body. Palace Master Xianxia, is it true that Jian Wushuang has practiced some secret skills to strengthen his body? Palace Master Immortal asked Xianxia. The experts all immediately looked toward Xianxia. I don't know. Xianxia shook his head. His answer surprised the experts, who expect him, as Jian Wushuang's master, to know every one of his disciples' skills. I really have no idea about that, Xianxia added. There are some secret skills in our sect that can be used to strengthen one's body, but our sect regulations limit access to those skills. Only divine realm experts are allowed to practice them. I'm a man of principle. Since Jian Wushuang has not reached that level, there is no way I have given any of those skills to him. As I see it, he already possessed this skill before entering our sect. After hearing that, all the experts were lost in thought. They believed in Xianxia and knew that he would not lie to them. None of the information from the Firmament Territory feast revealed that Jian Wushuang possessed this level of strength. This boy is really cunning. He has hidden his real power from us this whole time, even during the Firmament Territory feast. I reckon if it was not because he wanted to get more resources, he would not have exposed his power to us even now. He is really patient and determined. He truly lives up to his fame as a genius. When those experts looked at Jian Wushuang again, their eyes became frenzied. Without question, they all wanted to have him, a genius with such great talent and a determined mind, as their disciple. He has passed the 26th floor, so I'm curious if he can pass the next floor as well, someone suddenly said. In fact, all the experts were looking forward to seeing what Jian Wushuang did next. They changed their mind. In the beginning, they believed that Jian Wushuang would fail on the 18th floor, which turned out to be wrong. Later, they believed that the 25th floor was his limit, but he had already made it to the 26th floor. At this point, they finally realized that they should give up predicting his performance because they did not know whether he had any trump cards remaining. On the 27th floor of the 9th Heaven Road, Jian Wushuang was facing an even greater pressure than before. He had made a full use of most of his advantages when fighting with the puppet fighters on the 26th floor, and it had still been hard for him to defeat them. Now, facing an even more difficult challenge, the 10 powerful puppet fighter on the 27th floor, he was not sure if he could succeed again. Just fight and see what result is. His eyes were filled with battle intent as he made his move and brought out a second figure that shared his exact appearance. He revealed his two original bodies. Swish! Swish! The world body and slaughter body charged at the 10 puppet fighters at the same time, with each body taking on 5 puppets. In no time, the 27th floor was embroiled in 2 intense battles. Doppelganger's secret skill. The experts narrowed their eyes at the scene, but they were not surprised. They had already heard about Jian Wushuang displaying this skill in the Firmament Territory Feast. Chu! A spear attack that was targeting Jian Wushuang's world body quickly drew near. The world body met the spear with a sword and the sound of the loud collision echoed out. Before the world body could regain his balance, 2 more puppet fighters drew near him and attacked. Seeing that, he hurriedly moved and dodged the attacks. The world body was completely suppressed, as was the slaughter body who was fighting at the other side. Though the situation was bad, Jian Wushuang remained calm. Jian Wushuang became even calmer during this crisis. He was able to do this because of the many experiences he had while adventuring for all those years in the ancient world. Swish! As his 2 original bodies merged into one, the 10 puppet fighters immediately rushed towards him while slashing at him from all directions. However, he was not afraid at all. At that moment, everything in front of his eyes seemed to disappear, except for his sword, as if only he and the sword were the only things in the world. A sword is like a human being. It has its own feelings. Let your heart become one with it and it will follow your heart. Moving as you intend it to, Xian Yi's words echoed in Jian Wushuang's mind. Let your heart become one with it and it will follow your heart. As he continually repeated this to himself, there was a gradual change in his swordsmanship. Not only that, his sword soul, which had been floating quietly in the sea of consciousness this whole time, suddenly quivered violently and released a surge of power. Jian Wushuang closed his eyes and focused on sensing it, even though he was currently being attacked by 10 puppet fighters. Even during all that, he did not stop moving and he even became swifter, enabling him to slowly increase his resistance against the puppet fighters. And all of this was thanks to the insight into sword principle he gained a moment ago from the frenzied attacks raining down on him from all these puppet fighters. As a result, his sword soul began to release an enormous power, which slowly flowed towards his sword heart. It was hard to imagine, but Jian Wushuang was experiencing all these things at such a crucial moment. Yet it all made sense. He had been learning the sword principle for so long, even while he was still in the ancient world, building his sword soul up until it reached the highest level. Also, during the last 2 years in the ancient sect, he had been cultivating at an amazing speed due to Xian Yi's help. However, he had gradually reached a bottleneck. Therefore, just as Xian Yi had said, with so many accumulations, what he needed was a spark of insight. That spark of insight finally surfaced on the 27th floor. On the previous floor, he had gone all out, which relaxed him. Then, on the next floor, he had been forced to endure an unbearable pressure, which put him under an incredible amount of stress. While facing the contrast between these two feelings, he was finally able to break through the bottleneck. It was completely natural and straightforward. On the 27th floor, the 10 puppet fighters had used every method they had to attack Jian Wushuang. However, they were still repelled by him. At that very moment, Jian Wushuang finished condensing his sword heart, which meant that he could finally open the door and step into the real word of sword principle. Before that moment, he was still just an apprentice, even though he possessed such a strong sword soul, because condensing a sword heart was the first step everyone must take to enter that world. As of now, Jian Wushuang had finally arrived at a vaster road of cultivation. Back inside the ninth heaven road, Jian Wushuang suddenly opened his eyes and a streak of terrifying sword essence swept out from him. Swish! 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 The puppet fighters were all forced backwards by this sudden release of power. Sword heart. Jian Wushuang clenched his hands and focused on sensing of his sword soul, which had changed from its original form and become a dazzling light in the shape of a sword. This golden light was incredibly sharp, giving off the feeling that there was nothing it couldn't cut through. Is this light my sword heart? Jian Wushuang could sense that the power from this light was much stronger than his sword soul. He was so excited now that he had reached a whole new level in sword principle and could finally control his sword just with his heart. Show me your power, sword heart. Jian Wushuang was full of expectations. He moved towards a nearby puppet fighter and struck out. It seemed to be a casual blow, but with the power of his sword heart, it moved towards its target 10 times faster than before. The puppet fighter spotted Jian Wushuang's move and tried to defend itself, but the sword went through its body before it could even move its spear to defend. Jian Wushuang then turned to other puppet fighters, defeating them all one by one, so fast that they never even had a chance to fight back against him. The 27th floor was conquered. Going back several moments, to the hall in which the experts of the ancient sect were gathered, everyone's sight was currently focused on Jian Wushuang. He was the only challenger that was still inside the ninth heaven road. The other challengers had all failed and were sent out. When they saw that Jian Wushuang was finally being forced into a corner, they seemed unsure whether he would be able to pass through the current floor. This is his limit. Palace Master Ming Xian snorted in secret. Xianxia shook his head while watching the scene. He had the same thought. However, in the next moment, to their surprise, Jian Wushuang closed his eyes after merging his two original bodies into one. Yet he was still able to repel the puppet fighters. Upon seeing this, they quickly understood that Jian Wushuang had gained some insight into sword principle. This boy has gained some insight in sword principle. He received insight at such a critical moment? The experts were rather baffled. Then, right at that very moment, they saw Jian Wushuang open his eyes and defeat a puppet fighter with a single strike. Upon seeing that strike, all the experts, including Xianxia, were amazed. Sword heart. Sword heart. Inside the large palace, all the experts were currently silent. The weakest among these experts was a superior divine realm expert, who appeared to be so insightful and be able to could see through the swordsmanship Jian Wushuang was performing, including the great change that just occurred in his movements. They were also well aware of the reason for the change. It was because they knew it that they understood how incredible it was. How is that possible? Sword heart. It's really sword heart. Even most of the experts in the eternal realm who are good at sword principle have not reached the level of condensing a sword heart. As for divine realm experts, a divine realm expert that can condense a sword heart is already considered to be terrifyingly successful. But this boy, he is currently in the skyscraping realm. A skyscraping realm expert that can condense a sword heart? Even Palace Master Ming Xian, who always frowned at Jian Wushuang, was greatly surprised at the moment. In the firmament territory or even the whole eternal world, a divine realm expert who had condensed a sword heart would count as a super genius. But there were so few of them in the entire eternal world, and the firmament territory had even fewer. How could a kid in the skyscraping realm condense a sword heart? It was unbelievable, but Jian Wushuang did it. He really was just in the skyscraping realm and he was still young, but his swordsmanship had reached the level where he could condense a sword heart. All the experts there were in shock. Like Immortal, who was good at meditating on the slaughter Tao and wanted to take Jian Wushuang as his personal disciple. He said hurriedly, "Fortunately, he refused me. With my ability, I was definitely not qualified to be his master." Immortal sighed. "Even though I have a profound understanding of the slaughter Tao, my field of vision is rather narrow. I've tried my best but only reached the eternal realm. So, I suppose I would only have wasted his talent at my level. In the entire ancient sect, I'm afraid Xianxia is the only one who is qualified to instruct him." The experts in the palace all looked at Xianxia. "Congratulations, Palace Master Xianxia. You've accepted a good disciple. Xianxia, this little fellow is so talented. With your guidance, he will definitely achieve a lot in the future. A kid in the skyscraping realm actually condensed his sword heart. His understanding of sword principle must be far higher than that of his comprehension of the world Dao and slaughter Dao. It is indeed the best choice for him to be apprenticed to Xianxia. Hearing those compliments, Xianxia smiled softly but said nothing. Even he felt a bit shocked deep down. The boy has given me 2 big surprises in rapid succession. They really were 2 big surprises. The first surprise was the burst of power that Jian Wushuang released. It was far stronger than anyone at the same level. The second was when he condensed his sword heart. Attention, everyone. Although my disciple is still at the skyscraping realm, his battle strength is only slightly weaker than normal divine realm experts. So he is qualified to cultivate my secret skills, Xianxia said plainly. On hearing that, all the experts glanced questioningly at one another. In the ancient sect, there were many secret skills which were restricted because they were closely related to the foundation of the ancient sect and its enormous power. According to rules in the ancient sect, only disciples who reached the divine realm could cultivate these secret skills. However, there was no rule that did not have an exception. Sure, Jian Wushuang was only in the skyscraping realm, but his battle strength was about the same as a common divine realm expert. Also, the amazing talent displayed by Jian Wushuang had completely conquered these experts. Yes, many experts nodded. Even Palace Master Ming Xian, who was not very fond of Jian Wushuang, still nodded reluctantly. In addition, since he has condensed his sword heart, it won't take long for him to fully grasp the 3rd sword scar. Once he does, he will be qualified to become my personal disciple, at which point I'll take him to cultivate at Sword Mountain. Xianxia continued. Sword Mountain. All the experts' attention was immediately caught by these words, but each of them just nodded. After seeing this, Xianxia smiled satisfactorily and returned to watching the image in front of him. The current image was of Jian Wushuang continuing his journey to the next floor. After condensing his sword heart, Jian Wushuang's battle strength had improved several times. At the same time, his swordsmanship was more profound and delicate, which was completely different than before. After passing through the 27th floor, he appeared on the 28th floor. The 10 puppet fighters on the 28th floor were slightly stronger than those on the 27th floor, but not much stronger. However, with his swordsmanship, Jian Wushuang easily passed through it. The puppet fighters on the 29th floor were able to pressure Jian Wushuang somewhat, but only a little bit. After short struggle, he passed through the 29th floor as well. The battle strength of puppet fighters on the 30th layer was another notch higher than those of the 29th floor. On the 30th floor, Jian Wushuang was forced to use his full strength. By releasing both of his original bodies, maximizing his sword heart, and using the full potential of his body, Jian Wushuang finally managed to pass through this floor. The 31st floor. It was also the final layer of the 9th heaven road. Reaching this floor meant that Jian Wushuang had basically reached the peak of the mountain, only one step away from the true summit. However, this last step was as difficult as going to heaven. In the 9th heaven road, every 5 floors was considered a small threshold and every 15 floors was regarded as a large milestone. Going from the 30th to the 31st floor meant arriving at the final floor of the 9th heaven road, and it was the most difficult floor by far. The 10 puppet fighters on the 31st floor were much stronger than those on the previous floor. Jian Wushuang was even afraid that one of the puppet fighters on the 31st floor could battle with the 10 puppet fighters on the 30th floor. It felt like a single puppet fighter on the 31st floor was equivalent to 10 puppet fighters from the previous floor. The 10 puppet fighters joined hands and worked closely with each other. After only 2 exchanges, both of his original bodies had been defeated. In the end, Jian Wushuang was forced to stop at the 31st floor. This result did not surprise the ancient sect experts at all. The battle strength of each puppet fighter on the 31st floor of the 9th heaven road was the same as a peak intermediate divine realm expert. If the 10 puppet fighters worked together, the average advanced divine realm expert might not even be able to win. The boy really is terrific. However, in the end, he is still only in the skyscraping realm, so his battle strength is weaker than an advanced divine realm expert. Being able to make it that far already proves he is incredibly powerful. If he is given a little more time to fully grasp the fourth occult of the world Dao and Slaughter Dao, and to cultivate another secret skill, combined with his sword heart, he is likely to pass through the 31st floor. But, for now, it's still too soon. The experts sighed. At the huge martial arts practice field, many of the ancient sect disciples, including the 19 disciples who had come back from the Ninth Heaven Road, were still waiting. As soon as Jian Wushuang walked out of the wormhole, numerous eyes gazed straight at him. He stayed in the Ninth Heaven Road for so long. Luo Yong and Donger must have made it the farthest, but they didn't stay in the Ninth Heaven Road as long as Jian Wushuang. He did stay for a long time, but it doesn't mean he made it farther in the Ninth Heaven Road. We'll see. Vice Palace Master Ling Yu will announce the result later. I'm afraid Jian Wushuang could still lose his position as an inner disciple. The onlookers discussed unanimously. Jian Wushuang ignored the eyes on him and walked straight towards the other 19 geniuses. Jian Wushuang. Feng looked at him and continued to ask, "How many floors did you pass through? What about you?" Jian Wushuang wasn't in a hurry to answer the question. "I made it through the 20th floor, but was stopped at the 21st floor," Feng said. "I made it to a floor a little higher than you," Jian Wushuang said and smiled. "Oh? Then you passed the 21st floor?" Feng cast a confused look at him. Since he said had passed through more floors, that meant Jian Wushuang must have passed through the 21st floor. "Terrific." Feng gave Jian Wushuang a thumbs up. "I thought with my improvements over the past 2 years that I could have caught up to you, but it seems I was too arrogant. It doesn't matter though. I believe I can catch up to you someday." After hearing his words, Jian Wushuang's complexion turned odd. At this time, Vice Palace Master Ling Yu received the results for Jian Wushuang and others who entered the Ninth Heaven Road. "Now, I'm going to announce the results," Ling Yu continued. "Hua Ying, the 15th floor." Ling Yu announced the results according to the order in which the 20 disciples exited the Ninth Heaven Road. With Hua Ying being the weakest among the 20 disciples, it was only natural that he was also the first one to exit the Ninth Heaven Road, which resulted in his name being the first one announced. When he noticed all the strange looks that focused on him, his face turned red from embarrassment and bitterness. Zhong Ying, the 17th floor. Yuan Hai, the 17th floor. Xian Lan, the 17th floor. Other than Hua Ying, who had only passed the 15th floor, the weakest one among the other disciples had passed the 17th floor of Ninth Heaven Road. But there were only 4 people who were stopped after the 17th floor. Most of the others made it through the 18th or 19th floor. Xiafeng, the 20th floor. Jun Yi, the 21st floor. Feng, the 20th floor. At this point, the surrounding disciples couldn't help looking at Feng secretly as they marveled at him unanimously. It had only been 2 years since Feng joined the ancient sect. When he first arrived at the ancient sect, his understanding of the Tao was quite poor, but after 2 years, he made an impressive amount of progress that even shocked many of the ancient sect disciples. Feng had made it past the 20th floor, which meant he was much stronger than Hua Ying, so he would be able to keep his position as an inner disciple. Ling Yu continued announcing the names and quickly reached the last few places. Luo Yong, the 24th floor. Donger, the 24th floor. The surrounding disciples listened carefully to the results. When they heard that both Luo Yong and Donger had passed through the 24th floor, these disciples sighed secretly. Among the disciples who had been mentioned previously, the best one had only passed through the 21st floor. However, Luo Yong and Donger both had passed through the 24th floor, which meant they'd skipped 3 levels. It was really admirable. However, they all knew that Luo Yong and Donger were much stronger than the other disciples because they had fully grasped the fourth occult. It was quite normal for them to reach a higher floor. After the results for Luo Yong and Donger were announced, there was only one name left to be announced among the 20 disciples. The one left was Jian Wushuang. A majority of the surrounding disciples really wanted to hear his result. After all, Jian Wushuang had a high aptitude and had drawn a lot of attention ever since he arrived at the ancient sect. He even became apprenticed to Palace Master Xianxia as a nominal disciple, which obviously made him stand out even more. Jian Wushuang, the Ling Yu was about to announce the result, but she was suddenly dumbstruck by what she saw. What's wrong? Many of the disciples looked at Ling Yu in confusion. How is that possible? Ling Yu stared fiercely at the result in disbelief. But the result was sent from the palace and she'd confirmed it was the final result. After thinking about it, Ling Yu could not help looking at Jian Wushuang with an extremely complicated expression. Then, under the gazes of the other disciples, she slowly announced the result. By her voice betrayed her excitement. Jian Wushuang, the 30th floor. After announcing the result, Ling Yu breathed a sigh of relief. The martial arts practice field was bustling with people discussing the 20 disciples' performance inside the Ninth Heaven Road. But when they heard Jian Wushuang's result, everyone immediately stiffened. Luo Yong, who had bronze-colored skin and an air of fierceness that resembled a fierce beast, folded his arms. The burly man stood there with a poker face. He had absolute confidence in his own strength since Head tried his best. He was convinced that no one in this competition could overshadow him. Even though Donger reached the same level of understanding in the Tao as he did, and they had both passed through the 24th floor, Luo Yong believed Donger's performance was still inferior to his because he had put up a desperate fight with the 10 puppet fighters on the 25th floor. But at this moment he heard Ling Yu say, "Jian Wushuang, the 30th floor." What? Luo Yong looked up and immediately glanced at Jian Wushuang. It's been less than 2 years since he came to the ancient sect. How is it possible for him to pass through the 30th floor of the Ninth Heaven Road? Excuse me, Vice Palace Master Ling Yu? Did you read it wrong? Maybe he just passed through the 23rd floor? Luo Yong asked abruptly. Donger, Feng, and many of the other disciples who entered the Ninth Heaven Road, as well as the other people on the martial arts practice field, were staring at Ling Yu. They all believed Ling Yu had read it wrong. However, Ling Yu shook her head and said with assurance, "Jian Wushuang passed the 30th floor. You heard me correctly." Ling Yu confirmed it once again so that no one would doubt it. At hearing that, all the ancient sect disciples became shocked. The drill ground was completely silent. The 30th floor? Almost no one could believe what they heard. Even the two geniuses, Luo Yong and Donger, looked at Jian Wushuang in astonishment. It had been several decades since they arrived at the ancient sect and they were convinced they'd made great progress over the years. But their results were nothing when compared to Jian Wushuang. They couldn't even be compared. He'd passed through 30 of the 31 floors in the Ninth Heaven Road. There was only one floor left for Jian Wushuang to pass. It had only been 2 years since Jian Wushuang joined the ancient sect. Jian Wushuang, Feng, who stood beside Jian Wushuang, looked as if he had seen a ghost. He knew that Jian Wushuang had passed through more floors because he had asked him, but he only thought Jian Wushuang got through the 21st floor. So he was not that discouraged and believed he could catch up to him in the future. But now, he hears that it was the 30th floor, 10 floors ahead of him. In the past 2 years, he thought he had caught up with Jian Wushuang, but now he realized the gap between Jian Wushuang and him had only grown larger, far more than he could handle. The 10-year ancient sect competition came to an end. And, with that, the 10 places for inner disciple had been decided. Both Jian Wushuang and Feng kept their positions as inner disciples and only Hua Ying lost his position and became an outer disciple. However, even though the sect competition had come to an end, there was still a heated discussion going on about Jian Wushuang. It was a hot topic among the disciples at first, but the heated discussions finally began to die down after several days. Jian Wushuang brushed aside those voices. After the sect competition finished, he immediately headed to Sword Palace and began meditating in front of the stone tablet in front of Sword Tower. Jian Wushuang had already grasped the second of the 3 sword scars left by Xian Yi and had become his nominal disciple. As for the third scar, the third sword scar fused all 9 sword movements from the first sword scar into one, which was 1,000 times more difficult than the second sword scar. As Jian Wushuang was meditating, his cultivation in sword principle had increasingly improved. It didn't mean that he couldn't grasp the third sword scar, but he had no idea where to begin. It had only been recently that he finally condensed his sword heart. Now that his sword heart was condensed, he looked at the 3 sword scars again. But now they looked completely different to him. Previously, he couldn't even figure out where to start while looking at the third sword scar. But now, with just a simple glimpse, he suddenly felt inspired. Half a month later, crash! A sword light flew out and rushed through the empty space ahead. It seemed to move without making noise or disturbing the surroundings, but right after the sword light passed through the area, there was a series of explosions. Boom! Boom! This sword seemed to be a combination of many occults, which resulted in terribly enormous power. When performed, it was even more powerful than the superior rank 3 secret skill he created, Violet Devastation sword skill. What a frightening sword strike! Jian Wushuang raised the heart-killing sword in his hand, looking at a series of overwhelming swordsmanship movements in front, with his eyes displaying a slight shade of shock. This sword strike was so frightening that Jian Wushuang even believed it was much more powerful than a rank 4 secret skill. It was definitely a powerful killing move. Have you grasped it? Suddenly, a soft floating voice sounded beside him. Jian Wushuang looked next to him and realized that Xianxia had suddenly appeared by his side. Master! Jian Wushuang immediately bowed and said. Xianxia stepped forward slowly, then stopped less than a meter away from Jian Wushuang. When you condensed your sword heart on the 9th Heaven Road, I knew that it wouldn't take you long to grasp the 3 sword scars I left behind, but it's only been half a month. A mild smile grew on Xianxia's face as he continued. I made a rule. If anyone below the Eternal Realm fully grasps my 3 sword scars, they can become my personal disciple. Since you've succeeded, from this day on you will be my 4th personal disciple. The 4th personal disciple? It seemed to appeal Jian Wushuang. In the 2 years he spent in the ancient sect, he'd never heard that Xianxia had other personal disciples. Many disciples of Sword Palace said that there was nobody who had fully comprehended all 3 of the sword scars left by Xianxia. But now, you do have 3 senior brothers, but they have already left the ancient sect and set off on new adventures. If possible, you will meet them one day, Xianxia said and smiled. Understood. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly, filled with anticipation at the bottom of his heart. There were very high standards for becoming one of Xianxia's personal disciples. The other 3 senior brothers should all be extraordinary, so he was looking forward to seeing their abilities someday. Follow me, Xianxia said. Xianxia led Jian Wushuang to Sword Tower. Only Jian Wushuang and Xianxia were left inside Sword Tower. Now that it's only the 2 of us, I have something I want to ask you, Xianxia said while looking at Jian Wushuang. Master, please ask. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly. Earlier, at Firmament Territory Feast, I realized you must have received a remarkable opportunity in the ancient world. If not, how is it possible for you to reach your current level and even acquire the doppelganger secret skill in less than 40 years? Xianxia said. Yes. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly. After seeing his performance at Firmament Territory Feast, even the experts from every sect could tell that he had received an extraordinary opportunity, let alone Xianxia, so Jian Wushuang could not deny it. At that time, we didn't have any relationship, so I never asked you about it. After all, everyone has had their own opportunities and I won't interfere with it. But now, since you are my personal disciple, I have to ask about your previous experience, Xianxia said. Jian Wushuang also understood. As a master, one must have a certain understanding of his disciples' previous experiences. I did have a somewhat outstanding opportunity in the ancient world, and I was even lucky enough to be instructed by a super expert, Jian Wushuang said directly. Of course, the super expert he referred to was undoubtedly Emperor Shao. Ah, I see. Xianxia seemed to realize something, then he immediately continued. Do you have a secret skill for body reshaping? Your foundation seems extraordinarily strong. Yes, Jian Wushuang nodded again. I acquired a body reshaping technique called Immortality in the ancient world, so my body should be quite strong. As for my foundation, I have to thank the expert's guidance for that. Jian Wushuang didn't intend to reveal anything about the heavenly creation skill, which was his biggest secret. So, the only thing he could do was to place the blame on Emperor Shao. Immortality secret skill? Xianxia raised his eyebrows but didn't continue asking about it. As a master, he only needed to know what Jian Wushuang had experienced. There was no need to go into detail about it. Everyone has their own unique opportunities. The fact that you, a little fellow from the ancient world, received such incredible an opportunity just means that you are very fortunate and blessed. Xianxia smiled. Now that I know you've acquired the immortality secret skill, I won't ask about it anymore. You can go back first. I need to prepare some secret skills which are suitable for you. In addition, I will help you apply to cultivate at Sword Mountain. Sword Mountain. It seemed to appeal to Jian Wushuang. On the first day he arrived at Sword Palace, he heard about Sword Mountain from Zhu Lai. Sword Mountain was unique to Sword Palace and it was demanding to cultivate there. Sword Mountain was almost a legend in Sword Palace and few people could cultivate there. But apparently Jian Wushuang had the qualifications now. I'll take my leave then, Jian Wushuang said. Then he turned around and left. As Xianxia watched Jian Wushuang leaving, an enigmatic smile appeared on his face. My disciple is very cautious. His opportunity was by no means as simple as what he said. He is hiding a very big secret, but he won't even tell me about it. Xianxia murmured, but he didn't blame his disciple. On the contrary, a strong appreciation could be seen flickering in his eyes. Since it was a big secret, it was better if fewer people knew about it. If Jian Wushuang told him the secret easily, it would definitely disappoint him. The little fellow is superb, both in talent and wisdom. He is a real diamond in the rough. Once he is polished, he will be able to achieve a lot in the future. As for the polishing, it will not be that difficult. The very moment he became my personal disciple, the polishing had already started. Haha, if Cloud Sea Asgard, the Immortal Dynasty, and the Boundless Demon Sect knew that I've taken Jian Wushuang as my personal disciple, I'm afraid the three magnates would explode. Not long after Jian Wushuang grasped the 3 sword scars left by Xianxia, the news that Xianxia had taken him as his personal disciple had spread throughout the ancient sect. At that time, the whole ancient sect was in shock. The ancient sect disciples were aghast. Since Xianxia was one of the oldest, most mysterious, and most powerful palace masters, everyone dreamed of being apprenticed to him. It was a pity, though, the requirement for becoming his disciple was just too demanding. After so many years, no one had met the standards set by Xianxia, and these ancient sect disciples didn't know that Xianxia already had other personal disciples. In their eyes, Xianxia had finally accepted a personal disciple. Immediately after that, countless ancient sect disciples began to admire Jian Wushuang for having such a powerful master whom everyone dreamed of apprenticing to. As for experts in the ancient sect, they remained calm after hearing this news. They knew that Jian Wushuang had condensed his sword heart and that the 3rd sword scar would no longer be a challenge for him. It was obvious that Jian Wushuang would be able to grasp the 3rd sword scar and became the personal disciple of Xianxia. However, they never expected him to succeed as quickly as he did and only use half a month to comprehend it. The news of Xianxia accepting a personal disciple didn't just shock the ancient sect, though. It even created a great disturbance within the entire Firmament territory. One of the 3 magnates of the Firmament territory, Cloud Sea Asgard. At the center of a huge immortal mansion inside the Cloud Sea Asgard sect, dozens of elders had gathered, led by a gray-haired and barefoot elder with a baby face. This barefoot elder was Yunfan, the great elder of Cloud Sea Asgard. I just heard news from the ancient sect that Xianxia accepted a personal disciple today, and the disciple is the well-known Jian Wushuang. Yunfan looked rather grim. Normally, if someone else accepted a personal disciple, it had nothing to do with him or Cloud Sea Asgard. But it was wholly different when Xianxia accepted a personal disciple. All of Cloud Sea Asgard attached great importance to it when Xianxia accepted a personal disciple. After hearing what Yunfan said, these elders looked grim as well. I found out some information about Jian Wushuang. He is a peerless genius from the ancient world who just recently appeared in Firmament Territory Feast 2 years ago. Yunfan continued. Although he came from the ancient world, he gave an impressive performance at Firmament Territory Feast. At that time, he was already incredibly powerful. He had spent less than 40 years cultivating, and he had only been in the skyscraping realm for less than a year. He is only slightly inferior when compared with Gong Chao. After hearing that, all the elders were shocked. Gong Chao was currently a disciple of their Cloud Sea Asgard. They were all aware of his talent and strength. However, Jian Wushuang, who cultivated for less than 40 years and came from the ancient world, was evenly matched with Gong Chao. It was completely unbelievable. After Jian Wushuang arrived at the ancient sect, he quickly demonstrated his amazing talent in sword principle and became apprenticed to Xian Yi as a nominal disciple. Not long after ago, he took part in their sect competition and managed to pass through 30 floors of the Ninth Heaven Road in one go. It's truly incredible. Yun Fan clasped his hands. The 30th floor of the Ninth Heaven Road? These elders marveled at such a result. They all knew about the Ninth Heaven Road, which was composed of 31 floors. It was unimaginable that a kid in the skyscraping realm could pass the 30th floor. According to the information we have, Jian Wushuang is still in the skyscraping realm, but he has already condensed his sword heart. After condensing his sword heart, it only took him half a month to comprehend the third sword scar left by Xian Yi. After that, Xian Yi agreed to accept him as a personal disciple. Yun Fan said, then remained silent for a while. After that moment of silence, he raised his head and glanced around with a very grim look in his eyes. Everyone, all of you know how terrifying Xian Yi is. And it's not just because of his own strength. The most important part is his ability to instruct his disciples. Before Jian Wushuang, he already had 3 personal disciples, whose achievements are known by all of us. These elders of Cloud Sea Asgard also stayed silent. The 3 personal disciples Xian Yi instructed? Immediately, 3 figures appeared in their minds. At the mere thought of them, they all trembled in fear. Xian Yi. He is a complete and utter monster. So the disciples he instructs will definitely be monstrous as well. His first 3 personal disciples have made incredibly fast progress. I don't even need to comment on it. You all understand how terrifying the 3 of them are. Any one of them is strong enough to threaten the entire Cloud Sea Asgard. And now Jian Wushuang, who spent less than 40 years cultivating, possesses a strength that is almost equal to Gong Chao, and condensed his sword heart while still in the skyscraping realm, probably has even higher talent than those other 3 personal disciples. What Yun Fan said shocked the experts of Cloud Sea Asgard. After hearing his words, they all realized that Jian Wushuang's talent was far better than Xian Yi's previous 3 personal disciples. Damn it, Jian Wushuang should have been our disciple. That's Xian Yi's fault. With a resentful face, Shi Qianhan clasped his hands. Previously, during the Firmament Territory Feast, he had invited Jian Wushuang to join Cloud Sea Asgard. However, Jian Wushuang refused. At that moment, Xian Yi's doppelganger cut him in 2 and made him become a laughingstock. He had already been mad at him, but he was even angrier now that he knew Jian Wushuang had become Xian Yi's personal disciple. The ancient sect is already very strong. Yun Fan continued. We can't let it continue to grow. We also can't let Jian Wushuang follow in his senior brother's footsteps. He is still young and not that strong yet, so we need to kill him as soon as possible. When they heard that, all the elders were shocked. It was common to assassinate the geniuses from the other sects in the Firmament Territory. If a sect had some excellent geniuses, they would usually become a target and other sects would try to kill them. And, since Cloud Sea Asgard was the #1 sect in the Firmament Territory, they had a lot of pride. They always looked down on these sneaky actions. Even when the geniuses from the other 2 magnates, the Immortal Dynasty and the Boundless Demon Sect, were a threat to them, they still never attempted to assassinate them. But now, Great Elder Yun Fan was planning to kill Jian Wushuang, which showed how much he feared Xian Yi and Jian Wushuang. The threat from Xian Yi's personal disciples was far more terrifying than the geniuses from the Immortal Dynasty and Boundless Demon Sect. Jian Wushuang must die, but we need to do it secretly, in a way that the ancient sect won't discover. After all, it's hard to deal with their palace master, Xian Yi, Yun Fan said solemnly. As soon as Yun Fan's words faded, an elder instantly suggested, the Eternal Zone will start soon. That will be a good opportunity. Jian Wushuang is very talented, so he will definitely enter the Eternal Zone. There will be plenty of chances for us to kill him. The Eternal Zone? Yun Fan intrigued and nodded. I would have forgotten about that if you hadn't mentioned it. The Eternal Zone happens every century. The next time will be in a few years. If we're going to take part in the Eternal Zone, we need to start preparing for it as soon as possible. The other elders all nodded to express their agreement. The Eternal Zone was not only a good opportunity for the disciples, but also for the elders in the Eternal Realm. For instance, Yun Fan received an incredible opportunity in the Eternal Zone that greatly increased his strength and allowed him to become a great elder. As for Jian Wushuang, when the Eternal Zone begins, we can look for a chance to kill him. At that same moment in the Immortal Dynasty, Jian Wushuang has become Xian Yi's personal disciple. The kid has condensed his sword heart while still in the sky-scraping realm. That's already incredible. What kind of monster is Xian Yi going to train? The ancient sect is only one of the top sects, but since Xian Yi has already trained 3 monsters, it has already surpassed the 3 magnates. Now he is planning to train a 4th disciple. We can't let Jian Wushuang get stronger. Otherwise the ancient sect will be superior to us, the boundless demon sect. We must kill Jian Wushuang before he becomes stronger, but we can't let Xian Yi find out. Otherwise, if he gets mad, no one knows what would happen. Think of a way to frame Cloud Sea Asgard or the Immortal Dynasty. Simply put, Jian Wushuang must die, but we can't be the ones to kill him. When the 3 magnates, Cloud Sea Asgard, the Immortal Dynasty, and the Boundless Demon Sect, found out that Jian Wushuang had become Xian Yi's personal disciples, they all acted calmly on the surface, but they secretly made plans. As Xian Yi said, the 3 magnates couldn't calm down after they heard that Jian Wushuang had become his personal disciple. However, they were scared of Xian Yi, so none of them dared to do anything out in the open. The ancient sect looked the same as always. The second day after Jian Wushuang became Xian Yi's personal disciple, Xian Yi took him to Sword Mountain. Sword Mountain was inside the ancient sect. There were numerous towering mountains in the ancient sect and Sword Mountain was hidden among them. It was in the center, surrounded by several towering mountains, so it didn't stand out when compared to the others. When Jian Wushuang saw it, it seemed shorter than others, and he didn't notice anything special about it. However, when he got close, he realized this mountain was covered by a restriction that stretched from the bottom to the top. Follow me. Xian Yi launched several palms at the restriction to open it. Then they continued towards Sword Mountain. Even after they arrived at the top of Sword Mountain, Jian Wushuang still didn't sense anything special about it. It was just like a normal mountain. However, once they entered a cave mansion, Jian Wushuang instantly sensed an incredible sword essence that filled the whole cave mansion. This sword essence was profound and seemed to encompass everything. What a powerful sword essence! This sword essence includes many different aspects of sword principle. It's like a sea that was created by hundreds of rivers. Jian Wushuang thought secretly when he arrived at the core of the cave mansion. Jian Wushuang, look at those stone walls, Xian Yi said with a smile. Jian Wushuang immediately looked at the stone walls and his expression changed abruptly. There were lots of Dao characters on it, but all of them looked exactly the same. However, Jian Wushuang had condensed his sword heart, so he looked more closely at the Dao characters. At that point, he realized that they were all unique. When Jian Wushuang looked at the Dao character in front of him, it looked like a simple word at first, but it slowly transformed into a complete and extreme sword principle. It was a very advanced sword principle. Since Jian Wushuang only had superficial knowledge, he was unable to comprehend most of it. Very profound. Jian Wushuang shook his head and looked at some of the other Dao characters, but they were also too profound for him to understand. Finally, Xian Yi began to explain. Sword principle is quite broad and profound, and you've just recently condensed your sword heart, which is only the starting line for truly cultivating sword principle. Sword principle is very complicated. Because of that, it is divided into 72 concepts which are like 72 rivers joining to form a sea. If you only understand one concept, you can only comprehend a tiny part of sword principle. So, if you want to truly comprehend sword principle, you have to completely understand all 72 concepts. For now, you still have a long journey ahead of you, Xian Yi said and smiled. After hearing this, Jian Wushuang shrugged, but he didn't feel depressed. He was still very young, so he had time to cultivate and meditate on sword principle. As of now, he had only just reached the most basic requirement. However, if he had enough time, it would be very possible for him to comprehend all of them. There are 72 Dao characters in this cave mansion, and every one of them represents the pinnacle in a concept of sword principles. Every Dao character represents one of the essences of sword principle. So now, what you need to do is try your best to comprehend them and improve your understanding of sword principle. Compared to cultivating on your own, this will be easier and more effective, Xianxia said. After hearing that, Jian Wushuang's eyes lit up. If he tried to cultivate sword principle on his own, even with Xianxia's guidance, there would still be a limit on how much he could improve. However, if he had the essences that make up sword principle as a reference, it would be a different story. These 72 Dao characters encompassed all the different concepts of sword principle and broke them down to their most basic form. Being able to use this would be the same as taking an incredibly difficult task and breaking it into numerous simple tasks. It might be impossible for him to complete such a difficult task. But, if they were broken up into numerous simple tasks, he could work on them one step at a time. At the same time, he would be slowly improving his comprehension of sword principle. Doing it this way made it much easier to handle. Is this Sword Mountain? Jian Wushuang was very excited as he clasped his hands. He knew the requirement for entering Sword Mountain was very high, so he expected it to be an exceptional place for cultivating. To his great surprise, it was much more incredible than he expected because it was tailor-made for warriors who cultivated sword principle. As long as he meditated on these 72 Dao characters, his comprehension of sword principle would definitely improve. Although the requirement to enter is high, there is no time limit once you enter. You can stay here for as long as you want. Also, there are a few things I would like to give to you, Xianxia said. Jian Wushuang looked at him. Previously, Xianxia had told him that he would apply for some resources to give him. The first is a secret skill. Xianxia said, secret skills are very powerful, but the cultivation requirements are also very high. Most secret skills that can improve physical power require the warrior to be in the divine realm. However, you are only in the skyscraping realm, so you can't use those skills yet. However, I will give some that you can cultivate and are useful for you. The first secret skill is a sword art, Xianxia said, and then handed a jade slip to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang accepted it and took a quick glance at it. Boundless Heaven Sword Art? Jian Wushuang felt a rush of excitement in his heart. This jade slip recorded the Boundless Heaven Sword Art, which was a very powerful secret skill. There was a total of 7 sword movements and the power was quite terrifying. Moreover, the Boundless Heaven Sword Art utilized both sword principle and Dao comprehension, which made it a very versatile skill. As long as he reached the minimum requirement, he could even use the Boundless Heaven Sword Art with either the World Dao or Slaughter Dao. This secret skill is different from a self-created one. Those can be used to attack, defend, and movement since self-created skills will suit you perfectly. However, secret skills such as sword arts, saber techniques, and stick technique are killing moves. If you look at the Boundless Heaven Sword Art, it contains 7 sword moves that are all killing moves. It requires tremendous spiritual power to use them, but the power will be greater than a self-created skill. On top of that, you've already reached the requirement for learning the first move, Xianxia said. I've reached the requirement for learning the first move? Jian Wushuang was shocked but quickly understood the reason. The last sword scar from the 3 that Master has left is the requirement? Yes. Xianxia smiled and nodded. That sword imitates the first move of the Boundless Heaven Sword Art. However, it is only an imitation, so it can't compare with the real first move. After hearing that, Jian Wushuang was stunned. He had comprehended and practiced the 3rd sword scar. Its power was already terrifying and much powerful than the superior rank 3 secret skill that he created, Violet Star Destruction. Since it was only an imitation of the first move of the Boundless Heaven Sword Art, its power would be far weaker than the original. How powerful would the first move be? The Boundless Heaven Sword Art can improve your offensive power, but the most important thing for a warrior is to protect themselves. So I also acquired a protective skill for you, the Dragon Blood secret skill. It is a skill that will help you escape by increasing your speed for a short time. However, it burns your spiritual power to achieve this, so this skill should only be used to escape, not to fight. You should study it carefully. Xianyi handed the second jade slip to Jian Wushuang. It requires you to burn your spiritual power? Jian Wushuang was shocked. Spiritual power was the core of a warrior's power. To burn their spiritual power? It was very unlikely that anyone in the eternal world would dare to do that. Finally, I have one more secret skill, a very unique skill, Xianyi said as he handed a golden scroll to Jian Wushuang. This scroll was a golden jade slip that gave off an ancient aura. Jian Wushuang took it and quickly skimmed through it. Universal Tao scripture?